The Toronto Raptors identified a major positional need and signed free agent center Bruno Fernando, but is the big man really good enough to make the final roster? Let's get into it. The Toronto Raptors entered the offseason needing some changes and needing to bring in some new players in some very specific roles, mainly the backup point guard position, which was solved by trading for David Mitchell and perhaps also bolstered by selecting Jamal Shead with the 45th overall pick, a pick that was acquired in the David Mitchell trade as well. But one of the other major positional needs the Raptors needed to address in the offseason was that of a backup big. Not just any backup big. Kelly Olynyk is a great backup big. We also drafted Jonathan Mobo, who kind of fits into that category potentially. Maybe not right away, but eventually we are hoping down the line can become some sort of a backup big, rotational big. But specifically, what I was looking for from the franchise was bringing in a backup center who could protect the rim. We saw last season when Jakob Poeltl was injured how much worse the team was. We can even go back 2 seasons where the Raptors struggled mightily on defense to start the season. They acquired Jakob Poeltl at the trade deadline, a trade that they overpaid, we know that, but they got Jakob Poeltl. Immediately the team improved because they got a rim protector. Well, we saw last season when he was injured, the lineups where he was on the floor, the Raptors really struggled on defense. And it's just unfair to the players on the court, especially a lot of the young players coming off the bench, to not have that defensive presence behind them. But in an attempt to solve this with a lack of cap space, the Toronto Raptors perhaps have found their guy, and that guy is Bruno Fernando. He signed about a week ago now, but I think it's good that this video has been delayed a little bit because I now have a bit of a clearer picture as to what I think Bruno Fernando could provide to this team in training camp, and if he does make the roster, what he could actually provide to the team. But over the course of the video, we will discuss if he has the quality and if he has the caliber of play to make that final roster, and only at that point can we really address what he could actually bring to the floor. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video right here on Amateur Hour Sports, the YouTube channel, completely dedicated to providing you with Toronto Raptors news coverage and analysis, whether it be in videos like this or live streams on the channel. I try to get videos out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I try to get streams out Tuesday and Thursday, and I have other channels on YouTube that you should be checking out. Make sure you join the Amateur Hour Army today. So let's take a look at Bruno Fernando. He has spent 5 years in the NBA, coming out of Maryland in college, where I was a pretty big fan of the player actually watching him. I remember watching him playing college ball. I thought this guy definitely had NBA potential, but he's never really realized that. Entered the league with the Atlanta Hawks, spent some time in different places like Houston, like Boston, but found his way back to Atlanta last season where he actually had a career year. Now, that isn't necessarily saying much regarding Bruno Fernando, but nonetheless, yes, it was a career year for the player. Did give them 15 minutes per game, did give them 6.3 points per game with that, 4.3 rebounds, 0.6 blocks, a stat that I would like to see climb a little bit more for the player, but did bring in a little bit of blocks, something to say on the defensive end of the floor, and with the efficiency, as a big, 6'10", scored 58% from the field, almost 60% on twos, and had a free throw percentage which was a somewhat respectable, about 66.6%. 2/3 of his free throws did fall down. So that's the career year for the player. You can see I also added in the per 36 stats. If he gets 36 minutes, he looks like a big who can give you 14 points, 10 rebounds. That's decent. That's solid. And for a Raptors team that really just does not have the depth in the big positions to defend the rim, this could be somebody who helps out there if he can make the roster. What's rather curious about his signing is the contract that he got brought on. This is not an Exhibit 10 contract where you get a bonus for staying with the team if you get cut and signing with their G League affiliate, in this case being the Raptors 905. This is not a two-way deal. This is a straight-up camp deal. This is a straight-up, you're getting paid throughout training camp. If you make the roster, yes, you will get a contract for the rest of the season in some capacity. But as of right now, there is no guarantees for Bruno Fernando's salary beyond the training camp. But if you listen to head coach Darko Rajakovic for the Toronto Raptors, you see that there is some excitement potentially brewing about the thought of having him with the training camp. Bruno Fernando is a player that is excited at Darko Rajakovic being able to sign. Apparently, the Raptors have been monitoring him for a number of years. Darko said in particular, they've been monitoring them for a number of years. Darko's only been here for 1 year, so I don't know how he would know that, but apparently the team has been interested for a while now. They snapped up the opportunity to bring him in, citing that he is a good rim protector who is mobile and has some switchability on defense. That is certainly something that fits into what I described as the type of position, the type of void in the roster that they need to fill. But as much as they like him, they're not confident enough to give him the deal that brings him on for this season. So Bruno Fernando still has a bit of an uphill battle to actually make the final roster. And when he was signed by the Raptors, he said he was thankful for the opportunity. So opportunity knocks for Bruno Fernando to try and make the roster. So as I said previously, it's kind of good that we had a bit of time for this news to simmer, because when this was initially reported that he was going to sign with the Raptors, my first thoughts, based on the contract that he was offered, was that he was just going to be here for camp and probably wasn't going to make the roster unless something extraordinary happened over the course of training camp. In my mind, I'm thinking, look, this is a Raptors team going to training camp with not a great amount of bigs to actually use for practices, for preseason games, for inter-squad games. So I'm thinking that for the things they want to work on in practice, he's just a player who's going to fill those numbers in practice and be one of the rim protectors there, to bring in a fourth big, pretty much, to have with the team in the offseason. But then I started to look at who the Raptors actually have on the roster and the roster space that they have. There's still a pretty good degree of roster space for the Raptors to work with, and they still haven't even filled out the rest of the spots on the team. If you guys don't know, right now in the NBA, you get 21 players for your training camp. 3 of those players will sign on two-way contracts, so those don't really count towards any of the players getting cut. 3 players are going to get cut. One of them is likely going to be Jamison Battle, who is on an Exhibit 10 contract, the contract I explained previously. When he gets cut, he'll get a bonus for staying with the Raptors, with their G League affiliate being the Raptors 905. So you can operate under the assumption he's going to be there for training camp, but he's not going to make the roster. But there's still 2 other roster spots to fill. I'm not sure what's out there that's going to take over any of the spots in the team. So I think Bruno Fernando actually has a decent opportunity to make the final roster. And if he does, look, he hasn't really locked down a consistent role anywhere in the NBA as of yet, but they need this sort of position. Perhaps there is some untapped potential there. I spoke about his time in college where I was a fan of the player at Maryland, but he's 25 years old, maybe starting to come into his own. Got 15 minutes per game last season with the Hawks, albeit a bad Hawks team, but got 15 minutes per game there where he produced like okay numbers. I think that this is something the Raptors can work with. Look, I'm not asking for the world here from Bruno Fernando, but I think this is a player that is certainly capable of providing this team with a solid 10 to 12 minutes per game of rim protection on defense. And that'll sort out a good chunk of the minutes where Jakob Poeltl is not on the floor to help with the rim protection. If Jakob Poeltl goes down with an injury at some point, then you have that sort of rim protector player in there. I'm not saying he's going to start in Poeltl's absence, but somebody in there who can fill that sort of void and give you some decent minutes. I think Bruno Fernando still has a difficult task of making the final roster, but I'm very much open to the idea of him getting there. In the end, looking at the Raptors roster right now, it's tough to say, but I would probably guess that he does make the final roster. We'll see if the Raptors add more players for training camp. I imagine they will, looking for some Exhibit 10 deals, but opportunity knocks certainly for Bruno Fernando to make an imprint on the league and do it with the Raptors. I think that this could be a successful partnership. But what do you make of the Raptors signing Bruno Fernando? Do you think he has a chance of making the roster? What sort of role do you expect from him? Give me all of your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. That's all for me for today. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video. Make sure you do subscribe for more Raptors content all offseason and beyond. And I'll see you again next time for another video.